Hello and welcome back, everybody, to the ninth episode of the Void Wave podcast. And today we are going to discuss a mockumentary slash documentary. It's kind of both in a way, which is called Carnage. It came out in 2017 and was made by British comedian, writer and director Simon Amstell. And it is about a topic that we've already kind of hinted at a little bit in our very first introductory episode, and this topic is veganism.
Yeah, so this came out in 2017. There's another film with the same name, also called Carnage, but that's a completely different theme. It's nothing to do with this one. And I remember when this film came out, it didn't have the extra title, but now it's called Carnage, and then there's like a subtitle called Swallowing the Past, which is kind of thematically related to the veganism and the kind of the guilt of not being a vegan in the past. So this mockumentary is set in 2067, so 50 years after the film was made, and it presents a society, at least a British society, in which everybody has become a vegan, in which being a vegan is a de facto position, the dietary choices for every single person in Britain, and where eating meat and drinking dairy, etc., has completely disappeared from society.
Yeah, it's basically all outlawed, essentially. And yeah, the way the film is structured is that it's basically chronicling the in part fictionalized and in part like real events that which lead up to this future in which veganism becomes a norm and basically total animal liberation is achieved, at least in Britain. Like, we don't really learn much about what's going on else in the world.
Yeah, that could very easily be a criticism of the film, is that the film, was produced by the BBC. The writer slash director is also British, and the movie doesn't have a big budget, so I think they just said, well, we're just going to do Britain. Kind of keep it within budget and kind of within the scope of what they wanted to talk about. I think, though, it's very easy to assume that the rest of the world probably has followed suit, because there's no mention of the rest of the world, so it's kind of very insular, which is makes sense given Britain in 2017, so one year after the Brexit referendum.
Yeah, I think even like realistically, like it would have to be like a global thing, like the way like all of these industries are basically global these days. I think it just couldn't work any other way.
Yeah, there's no mention in the movie about, for example, people smuggling in meat or something like that, or going abroad on holidays just to have meat. So there's no mention of that kind of stuff. So it's kind of glossed over. But let's assume it's 2067. Nobody has eaten meat in many, many years. And this documentary is kind of as if it was done in 2067 about how society has arrived at that point.
Yeah, do we just want to jump right in?
Yeah, let's go right in.
Or, like it starts off with this pretty funny scene in this fictional like self-help or group therapy session where a bunch of former carnists or people that used to eat animal products come together and try to kind of come to terms with what they've been doing in the past when they were younger. And you immediately, like the way it is framed, that it's almost like these people are discussing like war crimes they've committed or something like that. Like it's something really, really bad.
Yeah, that's pretty funny, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, I haven't really looked into this subject a lot, but I'm trying to think if societies that moved past, say, segregation or slavery, if this happened in those societies where there was like a very quick change that overlapped, that happened within a generation. And if there was anything happening with the previous generation in terms of kind of atoning for their past or trying, not atoning, but because atoning would presume that the state kind of forces them to atone. But like on a personal level, if people in post in after apartheid South Africa, was there anything about like this? So I'm not sure this actually has happened. This sort of thing has happened historically. But in the story of this film, it definitely happened. So all these people who were born before the ban on meat and dairy, they kind of get together and kind of deal with the guilt or as actually the movie describes, The Guilt of Eating Your Brother, which is the name of a book that came out about this subject in the fictional universe, of course, of this movie, which is quite funny actually. And they have a lot of shame, and they can't process the past, their kind of violent past of eating other sentient beings.
Yeah, like there's this one scene where they like the task of the therapy is basically to help people to express these things, even because they're so ashamed of it that they can't even say it out loud. And they do this group exercise where they have to say out loud like the brand names of different cheeses they used to eat. And
Yeah.
stuff like that. And there's one woman, like, she can't do it, and she just runs out of the room because she can't bring herself to do it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of absurd, but yeah. Like, this movie is very humorous. Like, it doesn't take itself like super seriously, even though it is about a very serious topic, of course.
Yeah.
And I think that it balances very well, because with other vegan documentaries, those are usually very heavy on like the gore stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. They
Which
like
this
the
movie
shock
also
value,
have.
right? They go for shock value.
Exactly. Like blood and guts, and look how nasty slaughterhouses are, stuff like that. And this movie has it as well, but not to that heightened degree, like a movie like Earthlings or Dominion have it.
Yeah, so this movie is about, instead of confronting people with, look how monstrous your behavior is, it says, look how ridiculous your behavior is, right? So it's different propositions. And in this case, the ridiculousness is all these people who are kind of confronted with the past. And of course, in 2067, there's a whole generation of people who've never eaten meat, who've never known a society that eats meat, right? And when they're confronted with it, they get shocked, but they also think it's ridiculous, right? Why would anybody eat the secretions of another animal, right? And so it's a completely different approach. And in fact, there's a line at the beginning of the movie where they say it's 2067, etc., etc. Violence has been defeated by compassion, right? So this is a very different approach to kind of the shock value of a Dominion or an Earthlings, or slaughterhouse footage, which is often like a traditional vegan tool of propaganda. In terms of guilt, I think I feel this too, right? I spent the first 30 years of my life eating meat, and my parents are only responsible for my food up until a point, right? And then after a while, I was making the choice. But even that, I think the movie has a very kind of interesting take on that, because it talks about how kind of this behavior, even if it's a behavior that people should change, the behavior of eating meat, it says people aren't to blame. It's a culture, and this is something that's kind of handed down between generations. In fact, the movie does make that point. This behavior of eating meat, it's like a social thing. It gets baked into everything, every advertising. Every time you spend some social time, some happy social time with other human beings, communing with them, that's centered around foods. And because we live in a society where food is, a lot of it is meat and dairy and egg-based, it involves cruelty. And it's hard to blame the people themselves for it. I mean, I don't blame other people, but I do blame myself. But that's something else.
Yeah, like it's really hard to get rid of that in a sense, but I agree with the basic premise the movie makes, that it's not really like an individual problem, but that it's like a structural cultural problem, which has to be addressed on that level, and not just on a level of the individual necessarily. And then of course there's also manipulative advertisement, which the movie goes into a little bit.
Yeah.
And how fast food companies and the industrial animal agriculture industry in general, basically from the 70s onward, realized that marketing directly to children and their parents is very good for business. It's very profitable. And then animal foods started to get modified in such a way that they don't even really look any like meat or fish anymore. Like the movie uses some archive footage from old advertisement from McDonald's, I believe, and KFC, and the fish sticks with the captain guy. What's it called? Captain Igloo, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's his name.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the use of there's the movie does mention that how language has been used to kind of process monstrous behavior, right? So everything is kind of hidden in language, hidden in images, and everything that kind of monstrous or not admissible by any kind of societies. Moral standards, that's kind of all hidden away, right? That's put away, and then what you see is a completely clean presentation, free of the blood and guts, etc. I mean, it has the blood, but the blood doesn't have any kind of subtext of violence on it, which is an incredible mental trick to do.
Yeah, especially with the stuff that's targeted at children, like McDonald's Happy Meals and shit like that.
Yeah.
There's a nice scene in the movie where they show the Babe movie with the little pig and stuff, which is trying to escape slaughter, and the pig is obviously the hero of the movie. And apparently McDonald's did like a Happy Meal merchandise deal with whoever produced, I think it was a Warner Brothers movie, but I'm not sure. It did like a merchandise deal with them, with this little Babe tools in their fucking Happy Meals.
Yeah.
which is absolutely absurd, of course.
Yeah, especially because Babe had cattle and, kind of cow friends and sheep friends, and, even if the Happy Meal didn't include pig in it or bacon, it sure included some kind of chicken or anything, which were also friends like of Babe, right? They were in the movie talking and saying, "Please don't eat me," and that still ended up ending up in the movie. Yeah. So the other bit I liked was that when they showed the beginning of the first vegan society, I think in Britain in 1944, and they were presenting these milk and meat variations. And oh my god, they looked so bad. We've come a long way since then.
Yeah, it all looked like very grey and not super appetizing.
Yeah, it looked like some grey sludge, a grey jello of some kind, congealed grey stuff, and it looked
like
really bad.
I'm sure it wasn't bad food necessarily, but it just goes to show how indoctrinated we ourselves are. How we think, okay, food is supposed to look like this, right? Like the super Photoshop, nice and clean presentation of food, and then you look back at like this old educational footage, and you think, what the fuck is this shit? This looks disgusting.
Yeah, but that's the image. That's a war that's happening between kind of language and image and presentation, right? And if you want society to change and become vegan or more vegan, we need to, the food needs to be presented like the other food was presented, right? Which is why this past week there was a battle in the European Parliament about terminology, and if a vegan burger could be called a vegan burger, and if a vegan sausage could be called a vegan sausage, or if you had to be called, I don't know, vegan cylinder or something. Or
there was a lawsuit in Germany, I think, about it was either steak or schnitzel. I'm not sure. I think it was schnitzel. That you can't call like a non-meat product a schnitzel or something like that, which is it's just strange and outrageous. But I mean, obviously these industries, they have a lot of money and lobbying power behind them, so usually the court rulings will end up in their favor.
Well, the European Union has made a precedent, right? And I think it's an important precedent for this worldwide, even. So let's hope it sticks, because the ruling in the European Parliament was for allowing vegan or plant-based products to have whatever name they want. Yeah, I think the only thing that's protected.
Otherwise,
yeah, I think the only thing that's protected is like maybe cheese types that have a specific name that relates to their place of origin, and it's almost like a brand name, so you can't use the brand name, right? But otherwise, it was a big victory, right? So anyway, we were talking about people not being to blame, individuals not being to blame, it being like a culture thing and a structural thing, and this is obviously true, right? So when the movie talks about how society became fully vegan in 2067, it talks a lot about kind of these structural reasons, not necessarily moral reasons, so not up to individuals to make choices, but kind of structural things happening that are bigger than an individual, and then kind of society has to follow that as an inevitable progress. And one of the things it mentioned is, of course, diseases that come from the farming and eating of animals, like foot and mouth disease, which was a few years ago, and mad cow disease, and so on and so forth. And now we're struggling, at the time of this podcast, with another disease that was caused by the consumption and kind of farming in a way of animals, right?
Oh yeah, I mean it's always a bit difficult to exactly trace back where these diseases come from exactly, and with the COVID-19 stuff, the coronavirus, it either came from bats or pangolins. I think that's what they're called.
Yes.
These weird looking animals in Southeast Asia, which are apparently a delicacy in some places there. But it's not really clear. But what is clear is that it originated in some kind of animal disease and then mutated and became transmittable from humans to humans. And the movie almost calls it, basically. It was made in 2017, of course, so they had no foreknowledge of the whole corona epidemic, of course. But they mention a swine flu outbreak in 2021, I think, which kills a lot of people in the UK, which is, it's pretty close. Yeah,
they were off by a year, right? They were off by a year and one animal, right?
Yeah.
The wrong animal and the wrong year, but they got pretty close. And I think that's definitely those kinds of structural threats, existential threats that, in my opinion, are going to make humanity change a lot of their dietary habits. And plus, of course, climate change, which is also mentioned in the movie.
It's the next big thing. Of course, like climate change is like it's basically not too stoppable anymore at this point, but we just simply cannot keep on producing food the way we do, because it'll only make things worse, and not only in terms of these infectious diseases, but also in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And there kind of depends which kind of studies you look at, but you will find anything between like 15 to 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions being attributed to animal agriculture in specific, which is a fuck ton. Like 15% is more than the entire transport sector together, I think. Yeah. Which is like 10+%.
Yeah, and does that include, for example, the massive deforestation too?
Oh yeah. Deforestation of the Amazon, of course, for beef farms or animal food crop. Yeah. Is a massive issue, and just environmental pollution in general with these giant shit pools they have on hog farms, which are frequently leaking when there's heavy rain or flooding, which are basically like destroying the environment around these farms.
So the movie mentions flooding because flooding was like a big topic in 2017 in the UK. There were like lots of residential areas that are built in what is called floodplains, and I think the name kind of gives a hint of what would happen if it rains too much in floodplains. Well, it floods. Yeah, that's what they do. But with this amount of humans on a small island, you're always going to have to build houses in places that are not ideal. So anyway, there's this mention of flooding, of course, which is related to climate change and the thawing of the glaciers and rising temperatures and all that. But I can tell you, for example, in the UK, a lot of the flooding also happens because you have hilly areas that instead of having their normal flora in it, which would be a mix of trees and bushes and etc. A lot of those areas have been transformed into pasture for sheep, right? So
that's a big issue here as well.
Yeah,
so we have frequent mudslides and shit like that.
Yeah, because all of a sudden those areas cannot retain the water, right? It rains, and instead of kind of soaking into the ground that's had the tree roots have kind of excavated and created places and pockets for the water to go, instead of just kind of everything kind of just rolls downhill and into the floodplains, right? Just gravity. You can't do anything about it except
beat gravity.
Yeah, except not have those lands just become pasture. That would be the other choice. So because this movie is set in the future, it kind of tries to explain the transition as we get to this vegan and meat-free future, and it talks about something which I think all vegans at one point or another have to think about, which would be what happens to the farm animals, right?
I mean, that's a big question, yeah.
Yeah, because all of a sudden you have all these domesticated species, which are a lot of them are not, let's say, viable as wild animals. They would not survive without human assistance. For example, all these breeds of pigs that we created, and these breeds of chickens we created, which kind of get very fat very quickly and have way too many periods. And the movie just says, well, the remaining, that we just put all the animals in farm sanctuaries, but that's probably a bit optimistic.
Yeah,
that's a lot of animals, right?
The movie is very unrealistic in that respect. Not only in that respect, I think, but I'm gonna get into that in like my closing statement, I guess. But yeah, like any transition like this cannot happen just overnight, because there's so many domesticated animals that if you were to try to raise them or keep them in like sanitary conditions, which are not like mini concentration camps, basically, like there wouldn't be any space, basically. Like you just couldn't do it, right? So any transition would have to involve either the killing off of the remaining excess of animals, or like slowly phasing it out at the very least. Like stop breeding them at some point and then just phase out the rest slowly.
Yes, sterilize them and then
work.
And then kind of wait for them to kind of phase out, because obviously the pig, not the domesticated meat pig, but the pig in general is a very hardy animal. They can survive in all sorts of environments and eat almost anything, and breed very quickly. But the domesticated pig would just have to disappear. There's no other way around it, right? The big 600-pound, 300-kilo pig that gets very fat very quickly, but usually has mobility problems after they get to about 5-6 years old. That species is just non-viable for.
I mean these animals, they are all selectively bred basically to improve efficiency of production, basically, and they are in a way like Frankenstein animals. Like they're not designed to live that long, basically, because once they're ready for slaughter, they get slaughtered, even though their natural lifespan is much longer than what they actually live, right?
Yeah.
That will cause all sort of problems.
Yeah, and for vegans, it's a question that it's one thing to be a vegan and just kind of just be a vegan in terms of not consuming animal products or not buying leather, making that part of your consumer choices, right? But if you want to think about veganism at a deeper level, we have to think about stuff like extinction, and just looking at some species and saying, well, we would probably let these species go extinct because they only exist as slave animals, right?
I mean, continuing to breed these species
would just be cruelty,
would be super cruel, because like they have all sorts of health issues, and not designed to live that long, or live out like their natural lifespan without having issues, and like continuing to do so, that would just be awful.
Yeah. So
regardless of what kind of environment you have them in.
Yeah, so in that case, vegans would have to make some decisions which are not very nice to make, and which might kind of violate some principles of some vegans, but ultimately it's the right choice, for the welfare of the animals. So what does that mean?
I mean, like, of course it makes some people like sad to hear, oh, maybe we can keep a couple cows around or whatever, and like realistically this will probably be the case. I'm gonna get into that also later, but at some point, like, you have to ask yourself, like, why are you having this stance? Like, is it really just about your individual consumer choice, or is it really about addressing these structural issues?
Yeah.
And I think if you think about these structural issues, like the only conclusion you can come is that this whole system has to go not in one swoop, but gradually.
Yeah, in the movie, what prompted the change was also because meat became too expensive with all the diseases and demand. So the meat just became very expensive. I don't think that's going to happen in our world.
I think it depends. I can see a future in which like real quote unquote organic free range whatever meat like will be a luxury good, basically only for the privileged people, and that the masses will be fed with either lab grown meat maybe or like some kind of Soylent stuff, fox meat, because it's just cheaper to produce and more efficiently produced.
Yeah, well, certainly
I can see a future like that.
Yeah, if the vegan meat industry was sponsored the same way by governments as the meat industry was, then you definitely have it much cheaper than animal meat. That's for sure. So anyway, about tough choices, something that the movie kind of addresses, but only very briefly, is the pet question. That's always like a big thing for vegans, isn't it?
Yeah, especially with cats, of course.
Yeah.
Because cats are obligated carnivores, which means they have to eat other animals. Like they need to be healthy. And I think there's like some kind of substitution you could do, but it's pretty expensive and difficult to do, and opinions on it vary. Like some people say it's okay, others say it's not okay. Like your cat will have health issues and stuff. Yeah,
their digestive system is just geared towards processing meat very quickly, right? Eating and just kind of processing it very quickly and getting it out. And ultimately the pet question for vegans is a big one, right? It's one I struggle with personally because I have 2 dogs and they're rescue dogs. So I can say, well, I didn't create their existence, right? I didn't bring their demands on the world. Their demands already existed. I'm just making sure they have a good life. But ultimately, say if everybody became a vegan, what would be the morality to create pets, like new pets, right? Creatures who are kind of exist to please the human, which in a way is a sort of form of exploitation.
And which also often are selectively bred species which have a lot of health issues. And this is true for dogs, obviously. Like there's what are they called? Pugs. These small little helpless dogs which are just they're just a disaster, really. Like every time I see a pug on the street, like I get so sad because they have trouble breathing. They tend to be very overweight. It's just I don't know why people would breed something like this on purpose.
And if I'm not mistaken, they have very big heads compared to their bodies. So when usually
neck issues, spine issues.
Yeah, they need to be born with cesarean because the head is too big for a small mother dog, right? To have them with the normal birth canal, so they need to be born by cesarean. Let's be honest. If nature created an animal like the pug, that animal would have gone extinct very quickly because pugs cannot perform cesareans on each other, right? So
I mean, something like this would have never emerged as a species on its own, or like a subspecies or race or whatever.
No. Yeah, it's some really tough questions, and you have to ask, in 2067, would there be dogs and cats, right?
Yeah. I mean, like my line on pets is basically that like adoption is fine. Like if you get a rescued dog from a shelter, like now in 2020, like that's perfectly okay. I'm also kind of lenient when it comes to like food for these animals. Like I think it's acceptable that even as a vegan, if you have a cat, it's okay to not let your cat starve to death just because you wanna be super principled or whatever.
Yeah, but that's like that's the general conundrum of existence, right? Existence is always going to be violence against something. You're always going to need to take away from somebody or something to get it for yourself. Otherwise, you cannot exist, right?
Yeah, I mean the whole thing about the cat, like it just sounds very weird to me that if you have a cat and you already have a cat and then you would turn vegan, become vegan, that you would, all of a sudden, not want to take care of your cat anymore because it hurts other animals. like it's a difficult position I have, because you accepted this responsibility of caring for this animal.
Yeah.
And I think you're kind of stuck with that.
Yeah.
Until the cat dies.
Yeah, and the cat, if you just let it outside, it will just murder things to eat anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean they do it for fun, right? Or for play.
Yeah, they have no predators either in most cities, right? Even foxes usually don't mess with cats, because they don't. Cats are too big for a fox to eat or to attack and eat unless it's really desperate. So they'll just roam, right? They'll just roam, have a million babies who will eat everything they find.
Yeah. Pet sterilization is also like a somewhat contentious issue. Maybe not so much among vegans, but like there's some vegans who say, oh, you shouldn't do it unless it's absolutely necessary because you're mutilating the animal. Yeah. Essentially.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it's not easy. Like there's definitely a lot of stuff to think about.
But even on the not being easy part, to me that's it's something that's easy to say, right? You can say, well, it's not easy, but what I find is that a lot of people use that to not even face the questions, right? It's when, for example, when I talk to people who aren't vegan, look, and I'm the last thing I say to anybody is that I'm vegan, right? I only say that I'm vegan if I'm absolutely cornered with that question. When you
never want to lead with that.
Yeah, never lead with that.
As a vegan.
Yeah, as a vegan. To me, saying that I'm a vegan is like a last move where somebody says, oh, we're going to have this dinner together. We need to order food in advance. What you want? And I'll say, I want this, this, and this. And they will say, oh, but why don't you have the chicken? Because it looks good. And I'll say, well, and then I'll say, right? But only in those circumstances.
Only when I really have to.
Yeah, when I really have to, when kind of food is about to be shoved into my mouth and I say, no, please, I'm a vegan. And people will, and immediately as soon as you say you're a vegan, people will tell you why they're not for some reason, which is really strange. I don't think this happens with anything else, right? Like
I don't think so. No, this is a peculiar thing because, like, it's rarely me who starts conversations on veganism with people.
Yeah.
Like, unless it's maybe my family, because they've known, obviously, that I'm vegan for a long time, and we sometimes talk about it, but, like, just with coworkers, having lunch, in a time break or something like that, when somebody for the first time realizes, oh, this guy doesn't eat meat, and why is that? And then when they ask me, I tell them, obviously, and then it's usually this knee-jerk reflex to justify themselves why they are eating meat.
Yeah, it's funny because if you told somebody that you were like, I don't know, a Christian or something, right? They wouldn't ask, well, I'm not a Christian because this and that. They would never say that, right? They would just move on.
Yeah, it's just, okay, nice.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
But with veganism, there's always this need for justification somehow. Which, I take as like maybe a subconscious realization of that these people have, like I think most people are not so stupid that they don't understand what their food choices or consumer choices entail.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think most people understand that, and maybe this is like them guilt tripping themselves in a way and then projecting that outward onto vegans. I don't know. That's just my speculation, but it's really strange. Yeah. It's a strange experience, definitely.
Yeah, but this ties in back to the thing we were talking about it's never easy, right? Things are not easy, right? But just because things are not easy doesn't mean we cannot look for change or look to try to promote some kind of change.
Yeah, and it's also not like you really have to think super deeply about these things. I think it's good if people do, and I think it's even better when they are discussing this stuff with others, but you could also just take it really laid back and relaxed and just focus first and foremost on your own consumer choices first, and see how that works out, and then maybe later down the line you can engage with these more difficult questions.
Yeah,
because all of these more difficult questions, they are pertaining to these structural issues, and these are not issues that you yourself by yourself are gonna solve, right?
Yeah.
So it's not something that keeps me up at night, really, because I know that this is outside the limitations of my individual capabilities, really.
Yeah, that's being 1 out of 8 billion, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yes, these questions are difficult to deal with, and there aren't perfect answers for everything, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, it is a big
agree.
deal, but it's no reason to freak out over this stuff.
But that's the usual thing. Question. I mean, the way we've created this podcast and the introduction, episode 1, we just laid out all these adjectives about ourselves, right? We went
all the isms.
Socialist, antinatalist, veganist, whatever, right? Veganist. And we just laid out all these words out, and none of these things are easy, but I don't think it's fair to ask people who kind of assume these labels out of because the labels are easy to use and you can communicate a lot with a single word. But it's not fair to just say, well, imagine everybody became a vegan tomorrow. What would happen to pets, right? That's not a fair question, because not everybody hasn't become a vegan tomorrow or today.
It's never going to go. It's never going to go down like that.
Yeah,
It's going to be a gradual process.
And I think this movie does a good job of that, because it talks about, for example, that instead of people being vegans in society, so now we're vegans, we're kind of the outsiders. We need to use an adjective for ourselves to define ourselves, right? In the future, and this is what the movie says, people stopped using the word vegan, right? They just started using the word carnist. So those are the strange ones, right?
Yeah, they basically turn it around, right? Like now, the status quo, the normal thing is to be an omnivore or a carnist, I guess. And in that society, it flipped at some point, where vegetarianism or veganism became more of the norm, and you don't have to use a special adjective anymore for this. And I think that's why the term carnist becomes more of a signifier for the people who still continue consuming these products.
Yeah, that's pretty clever, and this kind of shows that you can't ask the question, well, what would happen to farm animals if everybody became a vegan? Well, if everybody became a vegan, it might take 30 years, and in those 30 years you have time to deal with this problem, right?
Yeah,
30 years is enough time for every animal to be sterilized or not, and to decide what species breeds continue or not continue, or or maybe you take a completely hands-off approach, whatever. But none of these things happen overnight, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Even say for example, abolishing slavery, for example, in several countries where it happened, even that process of abolishing slavery took a long time to actually happen, because you had to agree compensation to the slave owners, for example, right? Or you had to have a fucking war about it.
And it also, like, it was a huge change with the whole economic system, basically, where the whole, especially in the US, in the South, of course, where like their whole economy was basically based around this form of quote-unquote free labor.
Yeah.
And when they decided to abolish it after the Civil War, like, that just couldn't happen overnight, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's also a process, and obviously it's still, like, the US is still feeling the after effects of this change. Like, like, these things, they really take a while.
They're still not there, right?
Arguably,
and you could say, the world in general is still not over slavery, for example. Eating meat has existed long before slavery has existed.
Yeah. Like, there's a really good book which I always recommend to people when it comes to this subject. I make it brief because the podcast is about the mockumentary, not this book. But it's called Eternal Treblinka, Our Treatment of Animals and the Holocaust, which is written by Charles Patterson. And yeah, as the title suggests, it's mainly about the structural similarities, not moral or intention similarities between modern industrial slaughterhouses and, well, the systematic mass murder of the European Jews and other groups at the hands of the Nazis. But the first chapter of the book is actually a pretty good and concise history of speciesism, like how it evolved in culture, or how we think it evolved in culture. Obviously, like, this goes back way to like the first civilizations we know about, who started domesticating animals, enslaving them essentially, and yeah, how that really shaped our cultures and our use of language in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
highly recommend that.
yeah.
book.
So whatever change happens, it won't be overnight. So please don't ask vegans what happens if everybody becomes a vegan tomorrow, because I mean,
Yeah,
it
it's
probably
just a
won't happen
stupid
in our
question.
lifetimes, right?
Yeah.
It might be that, in the 10 years I've been a vegan, I've seen a massive change, right? And of course I'm privileged because I live just outside London. So London is, I think, pretty much the most advanced city in the world in terms of vegan food choices. Like literally, you'd have to try really hard to go to a place that doesn't have vegan options, for example. And it seems everything that becomes popular elsewhere in the world, vegan fried chicken, all that kind of stuff just appears here first, which is really cool. And when I became a vegan 10 years ago, you couldn't find vegan stuff anywhere except on specialty restaurants. They would have like a vegetarian option, but usually with dairy. And now there's vegan stuff everywhere. So that's just 10 years. But for some people, 10 years is it's a lot longer than everybody becoming vegan tomorrow. It won't happen like that. Yeah, it won't happen like that. So anyway, about, you were talking about kind of the relationship between concentration camps and enslavement of humans and treatment of animals. There's like 2 mentions, maybe more, about the relationship between eating meat and patriarchy. And
there was this whole bit with the sexualization of milk, basically, which is a good bit. I enjoyed that part of the movie a lot.
Yeah, they were talking about they considered people who drank milk to be perverts, like in the future. But because
it is pretty perverse if you think about it, right?
Yeah, it is a bit perverse.
Because especially some people genuinely don't know this, but these cows that give milk, they have to be more or less continuously pregnant, because otherwise they don't produce any milk. And well, how do they get pregnant? Well, there is this apparatus, let's call it, which is colloquially called the rape rack, which is no joke. It's really called the rape rack, and this is used to artificially inseminate these cows, basically. And yeah, I mean, it's just a very, very strange and gross thing. And
yeah.
This was really one of those mind-blowing moments for me when I really started, because I lived as a vegetarian for a while before I then decided to go all the way plant-based. And learning about the process of how the dairy industry functions, that really was the tipping point for me, because it's just so fucking insane.
Yeah, so in this mockumentary, the future, there's been a thing called the fifth wave feminism, which combines oppression of carnists, the oppression from carnists, and the oppression from the patriarchy, right? Where they kind of conflate the two things. And when they advocate for reproductive rights, it's not just for female humans, but also for female animals. So the two things kind of tie together, which I thought was quite clever.
Yeah, and it's all very tongue-in-cheek, and it's not like super. And how would you think about it? Like what all the right-wing YouTubers are pushing about, scary feminists with colorful hair, screaming at the top of their lungs. It's nothing like that. Like it's. But it's made very, very nicely, because it's interspersed with this archive footage from music videos and commercials, where you have hot actresses pouring milk all over their bodies, or they're eating a yogurt or something, and it sounds like they're coming, basically. And it works really nicely together, I think.
Yeah.
This premise that animals will eventually be included in this new feminist movement.
Yeah, I mean the world I grew up in. The food wheel, that kind of shows you how much food you should have of each type. That could have been made by the meat and dairy lobby, right? Because it says, you should have a glass of milk every day for your bones.
Oh yeah,
it's impressive how I haven't had a glass of milk in 10 years. And I've broken 0 bones since then.
You've not turned into
a Jello
as of yet.
Into a piece of jelly that doesn't this kind of mass. But that was what my parents were taught to feed me, right? And what I guess I was taught to feed my children, which I don't have, but that was like the normal thing, right? A glass of milk every day, and meat for your protein, etc., etc. So
yeah, but luckily, like public opinion is beginning to change on this, and there was like a semi-recent study which even suggested that like milk is in large quantities could cause serious health issues instead of being good for you, like several autoimmune diseases, and ironically it also can attack your bones.
Yeah, that's ironic.
Which I found super funny.
Yeah.
Well, it's not actually funny, but you know what I'm saying. And yeah, I still remember like people like telling me this shit in school, like in the mid-90s. Like we had like this special program like once a year where it's like the healthy food day, where they would bring these dietitians in, which taught us how to have a proper diet and stuff. And they all taught us the same stuff about milk. That it's super important and you absolutely need it, or otherwise your bones are gonna become brittle or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is just total nonsense. Like there's no, as far as I've seen, there's no empirical evidence suggesting that you have to take milk as your sole source of calcium or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the human body produces calcium, right? As a general thing, it would be very weird for nature to create an animal that needs to steal the milk from other animals for itself. That just seems very strange.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that human is the only animal that does this. Like I don't think there's any other animal that drinks like the milk of another mammal.
Well, cats, obviously, but only because we make them do it.
Yeah, true.
We facilitate this situation.
Yeah, it's not like it's their idea to do it, right?
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, I really like this movie. I had seen it before reviewing it for this, viewing it again for this podcast. To me, this is like, I feel the same way as I feel like about other vegan propaganda, which is, I'm already a vegan. I'm not going to watch this stuff again. I'm pretty confident about my veganism. I don't need to kind of reinforce it. But I think if you're on the fence, like if you don't know if you should become a vegan, or if you kind of wondering about veganism or what it means, I think it's a pretty good movie to show, because there's like jokes in it and it's entertaining. And it's funny because, there's funny stuff in the movie. Like at one point somebody says, who wants to sit and watch a whole feature film about veganism? Which is a funny line to say in a movie that's a feature film about veganism, right?
Exactly.
So it's an easy watch. I think it's about something like 70 minutes. And
yeah, it's not super long.
Yeah, and there isn't much kind of shocking. There's some shocking footage, depending how you feel about contemporary farming practices, but it's kind of an easy watch, and I like it. It's very inventive, and
yeah, I mean there's also like a bunch of like they're shitting on like the TV chefs as celebrities a little bit, which is kind of funny. And there's also a little bit about politicians in there, like footage of I think it was Obama and who was it? David Cameron, I think. Grilling for some kind of PR event and stuff like this.
Yeah,
like there's a lot of little bits in there which are super enjoyable and funny.
Yes, some of the jokes are very British society. So unless you live in the UK, right, they kind of go by the side. Like for example, they show Ed Miliband, who was a candidate for the Labour Party, and there was the PR disaster when he was eating this bacon sandwich, and he made like a face when he ate it, and he kind of spilled out of the bun. And the right-wing press just jumped on this and said, "Look, you want a man to be a prime minister who can't eat a bacon sandwich?"
Because meat is obviously also used to
politically
signal masculinity, masculinity, and this is a guy who is serious about his grilling. That's why you should vote for him. Shit like this.
I think we're at the point where in the UK, at least, it would be easier for a homosexual man to be the leader of the country before a vegan would be the leader of the country. Yeah, but maybe I'm projecting my kind of insecurity, vegan insecurity at this.
Maybe, I don't know. But I still think like veganism is still like it's more fringe than maybe people who've not experienced it think it is. At least in my neck of the woods here in backwater Bavaria, like it's really difficult in some areas to get something to eat, actually. Because like once you enter like the more populated areas, the bigger cities, it's not a big deal. But if you're in some backwater town and they only have one restaurant to go to, and you go there, then you're gonna get a salad, and if you're lucky, a soup or something like this, and that's all.
Bread and water.
Yeah.
I remember
it's not dairy yet.
Yeah, I remember my holidays in Portugal after being in the UK for a while, where I would go there for like a week or 2 weeks, and I would always lose a lot of weight because there was nothing to eat. And I'd be at the restaurant and I would say, well, I'll just have the bread, I guess.
Yes.
And maybe there was a vegetable soup, but sometimes they put milk on that too. And then people would say, but are you sick? And no, I'm not sick, I just don't eat meat. And say, oh, I'll make you an omelette. No, I don't eat.
Are you sick in the brain?
Yeah.
What is wrong with you?
But I don't eat eggs either. No, but it's very healthy. But it's not about health. But anyway, things are changing.
Speaking of, things are changing, but slowly, and slowly is better than not changing at all. Speaking of, I was just about to go on a bit of the stuff carnists say bit of the movie. They have like this fictionalized senior anti-vegan influencer guy who's live streaming and running around, annoying people basically about their choice not to eat animal flesh.
Yeah,
which was pretty funny. It was like a supercut of, what people say in YouTube comment sections about veganism.
Yeah,
it was like all very nonsensical, and those are like the little parts about the movie that make it stand out from the rest for me, because it's not just all super serious gore.
Yeah, there's a vegan musical as well, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, the lady in the cow cow costume.
And singing moo moo moo.
Yeah, moo moo moo. Yeah, I watched a little interview with Simon Amstell, the guy who made the documentary, and he was talking about the Albanian Eurovision Song Contest bit, where they have this lady just like holding this very long note, just vegan, and how they created the song and stuff. It was pretty interesting. He also talks a lot about licensing and how they were able or get away with using that much footage that wasn't their own in the movie, which is also kind of funny.
Well, it's a BBC production, right? So that's got to open a few doors, I think.
Probably, because public broadcasting and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the footage is their own, right? That's the thing about the BBC. They will
all BBC.
They will do this stuff, and in the same, the person who commissioned this probably commissioned a cooking show, or the many shows that the BBC does about farmers, sheep farmers, and which is just kind of meat propaganda. The BBC has a lot of these shows about lambing season, which is when all the new lambs are born, right? And then they do all these shows with the presenters holding the lamb on their hands and going, oh, look how cute and fluffy these lambs are, which we'll eat later, of course. But
yeah, there's some bits about this also, about like just how television treats this issue. Like I mentioned the TV chef people before, like there's like this bit with Gordon Ramsay talking to a guy who was having turkeys, I think, in his backyard, like a backyard turkey farm, and tells him you should under no circumstances give them names and stuff, which is really psychopathic in a way, but yeah.
Well,
They also have this Japanese style game show, which is what's it called? I think Mike's Meat House or something like this, where they have like children doing this little ninja parkour stuff, where everything is just sausages and slabs of meat, and you get bonus points if you hit like the portrait of the vegan activist and shit like this. Like it's absurd in a way, but it's also kind of good.
All right, so that was Carnage. I'll be 90 years old in 2067, so maybe I won't be around to see it. But I think things will get better, in my opinion, in that regard. Oh, yeah. Even if everything else goes to shit, the environment, there's wars and famine, whatever, I think people will eat less meat by 2067. Even if they don't, even if they want to, they will eat less. They don't want to, they will eat less meat. It might not even be their choice.
Yeah, we touched on this already a little bit. That's really not so much about like the moral reasons, even though vegans like to tell themselves this, and like it's really about the material reasons there. That just this kind of intensive farming, it just has to be reduced drastically at some point, like because of its impact on the environment and pollution, and the zoonotic diseases and resource efficiency and all this kind of stuff. Like it just has to happen at some point, right?
Okay.
And it makes me comfortable in some respect.
Any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a good watch. Even though, as you already said, if you're vegan, like you don't really have a big reason to watch these documentaries because a lot of the stuff will be old news to you. But the humor spiced it up, and yeah, I definitely enjoyed it and can recommend it.
All right. So that's all for us for this week. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, don't forget to kind of subscribe to us and kind of like, depending on the platform you are, it's either called a follow or a subscribe. Just make sure that you'll get like the next episode delivered to you, or notification that we've released a new episode. You can also email us at voidwavepodcast with any suggestion. voidwavepodcast@gmail.com for any suggestions for programs. In fact, we watched this movie because it was a suggestion for us to watch and have a little review. And, any comments welcome. And thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much for listening. Animals are comrades. Take care, everybody, and talk to you guys next week.